Welcome to my series based on Zentangle's Bijou Be Well, done in May 2025. Each day, Zentangle put out a video featuring one pattern, and the design was meant to be drawn in a short amount of time, so you could just take a little time for yourself and kind of get yourself centered. I encourage you to go visit their YouTube channel. I'll have the link down in the comments, and you could see how they did their designs. This series is meant to walk you through how to draw each design, and then also to give you some alternative ideas for embellishments and ways to kind of zhuzh up that pattern. In this video, we're focusing on Tortuca. For all cards in this series, I used the same tools, so you will see in every single video in this series a blue Micron 05 pen, a General's Indigo blue chalk pastel pencil, an 8B graphite pencil, two Tortillons, so one for blue, one for black, and white tiles. And of course, that's my trusty little pencil sharpener there as well. If you followed along with the Zentangle series, you will notice that they also include a white pencil and a Tortillon for that. I chose to not use those for my series because I'm using a white tile, and I find that the white chalk pastel pencil really doesn't add very much to the design. Take a moment to gather your tools, get yourself centered, make sure you're sitting comfortably in your chair. When you're ready, let's begin. We start with no border, but we start with a seed shape string. So one big arc going diagonally across the card, and then another one. So you end up with a seed. And then we're going to put down our pencil and pick up our pen. And we're going to create a grid in our string. So the first thing to do is draw a line from one tip of the seed down to the other tip of the seed. It does not have to be straight, but if you draw the line towards yourself, you have a better shot at a straighter line. Let's put it that way. You'll have more control over the line. And then come out a little ways and put a line on either side of that center line. If your seed shape is very fat, you might be able to fit more lines in. I did 3. Then turn your card and start in the middle of the seed and draw a line that's perpendicular to the lines that you just drew. So you're going to have some boxes. And you can see here as I get to the tip of the shape, my boxes become just partials, and that's okay. You're going to have some partials there at the edge of the seed as well. So pick a full box, and now we're going to draw a spiral. And just take your time. I'm using a sparkle line, so when I get to a certain point in the spiral, at each time I get to that point, I pick up my pen and leave a little break and then continue along the other side. And my goal here is to fill up the box with the spiral. So when I get to the outer edges of the box, I might be doing just little partial lines in the corners. And then I'm going to move to the next box and do the same thing. And I'm going to continue working with boxes that are either completely available, like the ones I'm doing, or the ones that might be partial, but still I can see most of the box. And I leave my partial boxes towards the end, mainly because it gives me a chance to see how everything kind of sits in those full boxes. And that way, when I'm drawing my partial spirals, I can make them look somewhat consistent with what else is there. In my design, I'm spiraling in the same direction for each box. However, you could decide that you want to do some clockwise and some counterclockwise. That looks cool too if you switch up directions. It's entirely up to you. If you opt to use the sparkle line, the one thing I would encourage you to do is, regardless of what direction you take your spiral, try to keep that sparkle line in the same spot. So I will complete all of my full boxes first, and then I'll work on all these partials that I have in my shape. Now that I've got my full boxes filled in, I'm moving into my partial spaces. And I am treating my string line as if it were the side of the box. In other words, I'm not letting my pen line go over the string line. So I get to the string line, I stop. So I'll just continue drawing little partials for my spiral as I go. I still start with the biggest partial spaces that I have available to me, mainly just for that consistency's sake. The smaller the space, the more difficult it gets to kind of visualize what that spiral might look like. So I start with the bigger spaces first, which will just help me keep things consistent as I move into the tinier partial boxes. And once you get your spirals done, I'm going to do an optional embellishment with all of my spirals. So the opposite side of my sparkle, I'm weighting the line along the curve just a little bit. So what I'm doing is I'm tracing over the line, just part of that arc, and making it a little darker and a little thicker than the rest of the lines in the arc. If you have enough room, you can almost create like a little bit of an arc that pulls away from the original line and then fill it in. So that depends on how big your spirals are. Mine aren't that big, so what I'm really doing is I'm just thickening the line and then trying to blend that thick line into the skinnier line. So in other words, I'm putting a lot of ink right at part of the arc and then just a little bit of ink on either side of it, so it's not just like a skinny line and then a really thick line. And this just creates a little bit of a three-dimensional aspect to the spiral. It also creates a bit of a like a shadow side when you look at it opposite of the sparkle side. So it just creates a little bit of contrast. This is purely optional. This takes a little bit of time, so if you are pressed for time and you just want to take just a few minutes to do a design, this might not be an embellishment that you'll want to do. I like the effect of it when it's done, so when I have time, I tend to do this with any of my spiraled patterns, not just Tortuca. So once you're done adding those weighted lines to your spiral, you might have a few places where you want to go back and touch up like I'm doing here. So once you're done and you're feeling pretty happy with what you've got, then put down your pen, and I am going to pick up my blue chalk pastel pencil, but you can certainly do this with your graphite as well. And on the side of the spiral that I weighted the lines, I'm going to just put a nice smear, as it were, of the blue chalk pastel. So I'm trying to stay out of the center, so that very inner arc, I'm going to try to keep the blue out of it. But everything else on that side, as far as I'm concerned, is fair game. So what I'm doing is I'm creating a little bit of a shadow side, a little bit of a low light, but then since I'm using the blue, this also creates a nice color contrast for each of these little individual squares as well. Once you get your color down on your card or your graphite, pick up your Tortillon and start blending it out. So that little partial up there in the corner, I'm just softening the blue. But when I have most of a spiral or an entire spiral to work with, I'm taking the blue, or if in your case, if you're using the graphite, and I pull it all the way around the spiral, but I stop where my sparkle line is. So if you do not have a sparkle line, make a decision where you want to create a highlight and just make sure you don't basically color in the whole thing. So whether you're using graphite or color, where you put the color down initially is going to be dark, and then as you pull the color around, and if you just keep pulling out of that spot, it's going to get lighter. So you're automatically creating some manner of gradient around the spiral, and that will also kind of add to the highlight that you've created, either with the sparkle mark or with just finding a spot where you want to stop. And once you're done with your spirals, if you're using color, put your color pencil down and grab your graphite pencil. If you already used graphite on your spirals, you may or may not want to do this. If you do this, just be careful not to put too much graphite down because it'll just turn everything muddy. But what I'm doing here is I'm just very lightly going over the original pen lines that I did for the grid. And what this is going to do is once I blend this out, it's going to make those spirals even pop up a little bit more. And then finally, I'm going to take and just blend that original string line out a little with my Tortillon. I'm not going to add any more graphite to the edge. I'm just going to use what's there. And all I'm doing really is trying to clean up that outer line just a little bit, just fuzz it out a little and make it blend into the full design. Take a moment or two and admire what you've done. Appreciate the fact that you've taken a little bit of time for yourself to do some art. And when you're ready, pick up your pen and add your chop wherever you would like. And there you have it, Tortuca.